Today is Saturday, July 2nd. I thought I might talk a little bit today about things that have caught me by surprise. There have been more than a few. Some of them happy, some of them not so happy. But I would like to start with just a little bit of an update over what the last couple days have entailed for me with a mountain of help. I have begun the process of donating Caitlin's clothes and effects. It was difficult. I knew it was going to be. It was hard in a way that was different than what I thought it was going to be, though the actual process of bagging up stuff was exactly what you would think it'd be. It was pretty mundane. When it came time to be done, though, and the last object that I moved to her mother's house was her wedding dress. That was kind of predictably very hard. It's in a good place now, and she will take good care of it, so I know where it is, and that makes me feel better, but it still feels like a bit of a betrayal having it leave my house, but I can't keep saying goodbye. In addition to that, I earlier today set up the financing receipt for the GoFundMe that was very generously set up for the benefit of my family. And it was just numbers, just banking information, but there's a piece of it that felt like saying yes to that money would make it all real, and that was hard. That caught me by surprise. I wasn't expecting that. Over the last week or so, difficulties have come from unexpected places. There's the usual sadness that's just kind of there now. But in specific, dreams have been more troubling, I guess, than I thought they were going to be, because they're a sort of an emotional tease. This morning, as I was waking up, I could swear that she was right there in front of me. And all she wanted was for me to rub her back, and so I happily did. And that was nice for about 45 seconds, and then I asked her to roll over. She said, "I can't do that." And I said, "Well, why not?" And she said, "Well, because as soon as I do, this dream is done." So that was that. A couple of days ago, I had what in other circumstances would have made a pretty excellent Peter Jackson film. It featured a usual ensemble of high fantasy characters, elves and dwarves and ogres and all the rest of it, and it was pretty standard stuff. Fate of the world, good and evil. The majority of it was kind of uncertain as to what the overall goal was, other than that the good guys should win, but in the closing moments of my dream, it was discovered that the entire point was a sort of a resurrection for Caitlin. The rest of the dream had been so clouded as to its entire purpose that one hit like a sack of hammers too, especially because it wasn't sad up until that last 15 seconds, so that was tough. I expect there will be more of these to come. Those ones aren't getting easier yet, so I don't have any real perspective or advice for anybody who's gone through that, other than to say that they're bittersweet. You know, I'm trying to take the sweet and leave the bitter, but it's hard for the moment. Other than that, the next hardest moment I've had probably since Caitlin's funeral was actually kind of a happy moment. On the last day of kindergarten last week, Kingsley was clapped out, as were all of the kindergartners, and he got a Kinder Egg from his teachers, and that was really good. And so here we are, and we've got an hour to ourselves. The younger boys were with their grandma, and we're hanging out in the car because he wanted to eat his chocolate before we came into the house, and he looks at me all smiles and he says, "Dad, I am such a lucky boy." All I could do was say, "Buddy, I love you so much, and I am so proud of you." I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting to be lonely and disappointed that Caitlin wasn't there, that same background sadness. I was expecting all of that, but I wasn't expecting his pure joy to hit me in such a way that it did. But it did. And I'm glad that since then we've had a couple of other happy moments, and I've been able to be happy with them now. It was almost like I had to get through that to see that that they are able to still be happy, and needed to be reminded that they'll be okay. They have asked an endless number of questions about death, about what that means, about what it means for me and for them. I expected some of that, but the place that was most surprising was the specificity of the questions and the amount of repetition. Most days there will be at least a couple, often questions that they had asked since Caitlin died, really. Middle guy, he tends to really concentrate on the physical aspects of Caitlin's body not being here anymore. So last night he asked me probably a half a dozen times in a row, where are Mom's knees? I said, well, buddy, Mom is gone. Her whole body is gone. And he goes, right, but her knees are connected to her feet. I said, yes, knees are connected to feet, but she's gone, buddy, all of her. And then he'd kind of roll that around in his head. And then he'd go, okay, but what about her ears? What about her face? What about her shoulders? And then often he would try and connect them to another body part, and on and on and on we went. It was probably 5 minutes or so. And I hope I handled it well. I just tried to stay calm and just remind him that she's gone. He's clinging. I can see that. He's trying to make sense of it. And how could he not? But what little literature I have read says that we need to be clear, honest, and specific when talking to children about death and what that means. But the sheer volume of it is exhausting at exactly the time when I am least equipped to deal with it. There's a not small part of me that just wanted to leave the room or to be mad at him, but how could I be mad at him? It's not his fault. Kingsley, my oldest, he is beginning to explore some of the more metaphysical questions. I've been telling them that we can still talk to her, and we do every night. We tell her about our day, and the boys tell her about what their favorite parts of the day have been. I'll tell her what we're up to and that I miss her and I love her. And then Kingsley goes, well, Dad, if she doesn't have ears, how can she hear us? And that kind of stumped me. I should have thought ahead on that. So what I told him is that it's one of the special things about humans, that it's almost like a superpower or some magic, that even after our body is gone, we can still hear our family. And that's how she always knows what we're doing and what we're up to. So that way, if ever we're lonely or sad, she can still hear us and we can still talk to her. And then he took a second and he goes, so we can talk to her whenever we're having any emotion? And I said, you know what, bud, I think she would like that very much. So that was surprising. I wasn't expecting the sheer volume of questions day after day after day. So at this point, I know that at some point tonight there will be another barrage of them, just innocent and well-intentioned, but I have to be ready for that because it's coming. It's coming. And lastly is libido. I expected it to disappear entirely, and it didn't. I almost wish it did. It's hard because the thought of thinking of my now dead wife in a romantic fashion is almost sick in some sense, I guess. And the notion of thinking about anybody else makes me sick. So I don't want that. I don't want either of those things. So I'm kind of stuck. I don't have any really good thoughts on that, just that in trying to read what I could on the internet, it became clear very quickly that this is a subject that is not talked about, especially amongst widowers. There's some little bits about how widows should formally deal with grief and potentially recoupling later in life, but there's very little directed to men. And so it's been confusing and lonely, mostly lonely. The one thing I did get from Catholic practice is that there's kind of a formalized procession of time that historically had been 6 months in like a deep grief, and then another 6 months in like a medium grief, and then another year following that in like near or light grief. I might get those terms slightly wrong. Those timelines have been edited as years have gone on and are now slightly shorter, but that the deep grief portion is still at least a month. I'm sure that the usefulness of the timeline will vary from time to time and from person to person, but I think it's worth being gentle with yourself. We are, in some sense, slaves to our biology, and we get to put parameters on that. We get to control for it, but we don't get full control over that, what our body does. So be kind to yourself. Try not to be overly critical. Guilt is a real thing, and so is shame. Those are not helpful. And then, even from a secular perspective, I would encourage anybody who has had any questions to consider the thoughts behind that religious or any of the religious practices. Not just physical abstinence, but trying to really deal with grief personally and internally before bringing someone else into your life in an intimate fashion. It's the cocktail of loneliness, vulnerability, sadness, and deep confusion could lead to very dysfunctional coupling, I'm sure. And in addition, I don't think would do anybody any favors. I wish there was more guidance on this. Perhaps once I enter into professionalized counseling, there will be. But a couple of the things I should say I had read actually made specific mention of the fact that even in formalized counseling or like psychotherapy or psychology sessions, there's often a taboo surrounding it. So I don't know, I'll relay more as I know more. There's no guidebook for this. There's no easy answers. All I can do is continue to share, which I will, and hope that someone gets some utility out of this, just like anything else. Thank you.